You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
Hey y'all, this is Blake, creator and host of Abandoned, the All-American Ruins podcast. This is a bonus episode featuring a moderated discussion from a larger event I hosted with my buddy, writer Isabel Wilder, recent Signal Award winner for her episode Frozen in Time from this past season. We chatted at the Ulster County Historical Society on October 12th, 2025, talking about ruins and how they reflect America's past, present, and future, while doubling as playgrounds for creativity, imagination, and healing. The event also featured a screening of the All-American Ruins short, All-American Ruins Nevele Grand Hotel, which is available at hudsey.org for free. I hope you enjoy our conversation as much as I enjoyed participating in it. An extra special thanks to Ulster County Historical Society in Kingston, New York, for hosting us.
So today's presenters are Blake File and Isabel Wilder. Blake is an Ambie-winning multidisciplinary artist and the creator of the critically acclaimed multimedia travelogue All-American Ruins, which has seen numerous audio, video, and performance installations. Anybody familiar with this? Yes, great, excellent. He currently serves as the Operation and Programs Manager at TMI Project, yay TMI, we love them, and co-hosts Cinema Kingston on WKNY. Isabel was raised in the foothills of the Shawangunk Mountains. She works as a pen-for-hire freelance photographer, potter, and astrological consultant. So let's give them a warm welcome.
It's so nice to see everybody. I didn't see the show of hands of people who are familiar with All-American Ruins, so can I see that one more time? Well, thank you for coming. Who is not familiar with All-American Ruins? Even better. Welcome. Fresh meat. I'm so excited. My name is Blake. I'm the creator of All-American Ruins, which, as Peter mentioned, is a multimedia travelogue. And I'm really excited to share this body of work with you today in this very beautiful space that is, Isabel and I walked in and you were so shocked that you had never been here. It's very easy to drive by it, so I'm glad that everyone is in this space and helping Peter and the organization keep its mission going, which is exciting. So I think we've got a lot of ground to cover, but before I get started, I wondered if y'all have ever heard this word before, the word anemoia. Can I see a show of hands for folks who have? So my boyfriend, his best friend, and Isabel. Awesome. So it is a noun, but it is not a word that is officially recognized by the Oxford English Dictionary. This is a word that was developed for a small blog that started in the early 2000s called the Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows. And what it means is nostalgia for a time and place that one has never known. This might be a feeling that a lot of you are kind of familiar with, but if not, by the end of this presentation, you will know very well what it feels like to experience this word. And as we walk through the All-American Ruins of Ulster County today, I want you all to remember this word because it's going to become very important on our adventure together. Welcome in. Thank you for coming. Nice to see you. Very quickly, what is All-American Ruins? What does it mean, multimedia travelogue? Well, as Peter said, it's an award-winning multimedia travelogue where I recount my expeditions exploring abandoned spaces across the United States and around the world and reimagine those experiences through fantastical multimedia storytelling. So a very simple little concept. What happened was I started writing about my experiences exploring these spaces on Medium. That very quickly became an immersive audio series, which then was adapted into an ongoing docu-anthology that Hudsey has been helping me produce. I don't know if you're all familiar with Hudsey, but they are a nonprofit based up here in the Hudson Valley, and they help filmmakers who don't have access to resources be able to make their dreams come true. And so that's what they've done for me, and we'll actually get to experience part of the docu-anthology today. Along the way, All-American Ruins is also investigating the underbelly of the United States by asking all sorts of critical questions about the country through the lens of its forgotten spaces and what those spaces say about our past and present and future. So we're using genre-bending storytelling in these photo essays, immersive podcast episodes, and short films, and through that, I have been able to explore this concept of imagination as a tool for healing and share those stories with audiences worldwide. So you might be asking, right, well, what does that mean, multimodal storytelling? Well, there are several ways, as I said, to experience the magic of All American Ruins, but those modalities they're all deeply interrelated. So you could start, just as an example, with the original photo essay that I wrote about the Nevele Grand Resort, which is right down the road here on 209. And then you could move into the immersive audio podcast, and then you could go to the episode of the Hudsey series. And I think what's been so exciting about this is I grew up really having a very lot of interests, but I was living in a time where people were telling me, you need to focus on that one thing, you need to do that one thing and do it really well. And that never really worked for me. So luckily, I found All American Ruins and was able to explore all of these different modalities in one space, which has been really exciting. But I'm not just going out and exploring abandoned spaces. I am intentionally going out into these playgrounds and actively accessing my imagination as a tool for mental, emotional, and spiritual wellness, and more. I would be remiss really quickly, as I mentioned, Hudsey, but also Radio Kingston. They have provided the technical resources for me to be able to produce the podcast that some of you are familiar with. And so now you might be asking yourselves, right, we've heard a little about you, but who are you exactly, and why should we listen to you as some sort of authority on abandoned spaces? I am all these words, but really what that just means is multidisciplinary artist. And you can learn more about my work on my website, but really, if I were to describe myself to you, I would say that I have a very sincerely active imagination, and I want to see a world of magic, and I look for grace and beauty in everything that I do. But most importantly, I hope to leave the world a better place when I leave than when I first got here. Was that an owl? But which is fine. But who am I really? And really, who are any of us in this room? I like to say that we don't have stories, we are walking stories. And I often will walk down the streets of Kingston or even New York City, and I will start to see sort of little books appearing above people's heads and wondering and asking myself questions. Well, who are these people? What are their lives like? What did they have for breakfast this morning? And I do believe that each of us is an ongoing story. We all have a beginning and a middle and an end, and many beginnings and middles and ends in between that. So, to get us started, I would like to tell you a little bit about my humble beginnings in the mountains of Colorado. And since we are exploring the power of imagination today, I'd like to take you back to the early 1990s, what a great time to be alive, and see what it was like just before the internet happened. And I know this is going to be a little strange, but I would invite you to close your eyes as I share this little bit of my story, because I want you to see what comes up in your imagination as I walk through it. So if everyone could indulge me very quickly and get comfortable and close your eyes. And before I even start sharing the story, I want you to start noticing some of the sounds that you might be hearing in this beautiful old Bevier house. And for me, the amazing thing about this exercise is you start to realize the more that you listen, the more you realize that there are sounds that you don't even pay attention to that are happening all the time, all around you. It could be your neighbor's breath next to you. It could be the sound of Peter behind you taking photographs. It could be the whir of this projector that I hope isn't blocking anybody's view. Just really notice those sounds, how they make you feel in your body. So as a kid, I was fascinated with an abandoned dairy farm down the hill from my home in Colorado. And there was this feeling that I had been there before. Now, of course, this wasn't possible because the farm, which was part of the Modern Woodmen of America tuberculosis sanatorium that opened in 1909, was closed by 1980. And I was born in 87. So not a possibility that I could have been there before. But that funny feeling that I experienced was more than just a weird familiarity. It also gave me a sense of security and serenity. And in the attached house that was still filled with dishes and furniture and clothes, I ran my fingers along the walls, and it somehow felt very recognizable to me. And then on one fateful day, that beautiful dairy barn burned to the ground. And then we moved away, and I forgot about it. And as a side note, you can learn more about the history of that very dairy barn and the Modern Woodmen of America tuberculosis sanatorium in a podcast episode I produced as part of my partnership with History Colorado. And you can also open your eyes now. So I'm just curious, behind these children playing on this wall, is that maybe what you imagined? Maybe so. Every time I snuck into this historical beauty, I found myself engaging in made-up conversations with imaginary characters who might have once actually lived there. And with these ghosty friends, I found kinship and safety and meaning, and it was a very healing space for me. Though I don't actually know if this young kid in those tiny gray booty shorts was aware of those feelings. I just knew that I loved being there. And I loved putting my hands on the walls, I loved the smells, and I loved the sounds of this empty space. And the more I frequented visits to the abandoned dairy farm, particularly the attached farmhouse, the more it transformed into my own personal private sanctuary. And specifically, that funny feeling of anemoia, this deep nostalgia for a time and place one has never known, continued to calm my nervous system. C.S. Lewis, just curiously, also championed a German word, Sehnsucht, which essentially means a yearning, wistful longing. I feel like I was really good at dressing myself at the age of 6. I'd wear that today. Playing pretend inside of America and the abandoned spaces that we have here, it did become a spiritual practice for me. I don't think I knew that at the time as a 6-year-old, but this refuge happened to me during what was oftentimes a difficult childhood. And believe it or not, there's actually a little bit of science behind this. Because among many other learning experiences that the project has provided, All American Ruins has shown me that no other part of the human experience is more unknown than the imagination, which is an integral part of our survival instinct. So every conscious human decision begins in the creative mind, and it makes imagination an emblem of societal progress and a key component of the human sciences. And mounting research actually suggests that the power of the human imagination extends far beyond wonderment and creativity. And this is a great section of an essay that Dr. Kathy Malchiodi, who is a social scientist and psychologist who does a lot of work in imagination play. She states that many contemporary psychotherapists believe imagination sets the stage for engagement in treatment, positive shifts in thoughts and feelings, and ultimately the discovery of novel ways to overcome life's challenges. But the question becomes for me, okay, so we can go back to these memories that we have as children and reimagine them to help us recreate the story that we live in the present. But what I wonder is, can adults actually access this childlike version of our imagination to safely work towards mental wellness in real time? And I think the answer is yes, because childhood was only the first time that I found refuge inside of abandoned spaces. So I want you to all remember where you were in May of 2020. What were you doing? It's a very interesting time. And I woke up one morning from a dream that I was back inside that dairy farm, which I had not thought about in years. And I had that same funny feeling of anemoia in my gut, and it was bubbling. And it honestly was the first time in months that I had felt a sense of safety or security, because as we all know, the pandemic, COVID-19, had been raging for about 3 months, and I am a germophobic isolationist, and the anxiety of that particular experience had really taken a hold of my life. And so I was laying there in bed, and I was thinking about this abandoned dairy farm, and then I started wondering, oh, maybe there are abandoned spaces here where I live in Ulster County, and maybe I could go explore them. I don't know. And so I pulled up the Google machine, and sure as shit, there's a ton of abandoned spaces in the United States. And in fact, it is estimated that there are roughly 150,000 abandoned buildings that are documented in the United States alone, notwithstanding the ones that are not documented. It's very challenging to find an actual figure for the number of abandoned buildings that exist in this country. But nonetheless, I began to venture out to the ruins of America. These are places that look like they've been raptured. Hi, nice to see you. First here in Ulster County, and then eventually I have traveled to over 50 locations in 18 states and 4 different countries over the past 5 years. And presto, All American Ruins came to be. As I said, it started merely as me snapping photos at these spaces. These evolved into fantastical essays on a blog. Those morphed into the podcast series. That transformed into the docuseries. And soon, we'll dive into immersive audio theater. I will talk about that towards the end, and so on and so forth. Now, I realize this might sound dramatic. I really do. But I believe this to be sure. I forgot that this was the 5th photo I put. This project saved my life. And I think that many people in this room, as I heard the reactions to my isolationist feelings, can relate to that anxiety that came with, at least for me, the pandemic. And I found real sanctuary in going into these kinds of spaces. Using my imagination as a grown-up helped me stay sane and grounded, and by finding these safe places to escape to and connect with my creativity and wanderlust, and really meditation, it helps me feel connected to something much bigger than myself. And I do use the word sanctuary very intentionally. The project did save my life in a different way, though. I know that a lot of us can probably relate to the fact that the last few years have felt very wrought with unrest, socially and culturally and politically. But these abandoned spaces, they also became places for me to reflect on the story of this country that I had told myself and told I was supposed to tell myself from a very, very young age as a public school kid. The project launched around the same time that we all started to see these social uprisings that were stirring and exploding, both on the heels of the Black Lives Matter movement and in the midst of the ramp-up of the Women's March. I also think of the fight for gun control with March on Our Lives, the ongoing battle for LGBTQIA+ rights, and there's actually a couple of people in this room who were part of the forefront of that very fight for queer rights back in the 70s and the 80s, the tumble down of our economy, the evisceration of our environment, climate change, and digesting this upheaval. I don't know if this is the same for you, but for me, it was made a hell of a lot easier by finding these playgrounds and spending time in these playgrounds, reevaluating my feelings about the country that I love so very deeply, because I've spent so much time wandering its ruins. And I might suggest that we as a collective can actually learn a lot about a different side of American history through the prism of these abandoned spaces. And specifically today, the ruins of Ulster County. So take that 150,000 figure that I roughly was able to figure out on the internet, and we're going to boil it down just to Ulster County. Again, this is an extremely rough number, and it was very difficult to get to this number. But it is estimated there are roughly 900 documented abandoned buildings in this county. Now, this could be a number of things. Who's familiar with Dysing's Bakery in Kingston? So you know that's the stone buildings across the street? That is one of the many abandoned spaces that are under the banner of this definition of abandoned. There's a house that is right across the street here that at one point was abandoned, and that house, very unlike the ruins I just mentioned, it was filled to the brim with objects from a family that left them behind before it was purchased and remodeled. Poorly, I might add. So I'm going to wrap up this little context chat here so that we can dive into a little bit of imagination play. And we're going to go to the mecca of abandoned spaces for people in the urban exploration community, urban exploration being the practice of exploring the unknown spaces in the world. And it happens to be right here in Ulster County. It is the Netherley Grand Hotel. I'm sure many people in this room are very familiar with it. Complete side note, Jake Watcher, who is from the Borscht Belt Film Festival, is here today. And I would encourage everyone to look up the Borscht Belt Film Festival because it's an amazing organization as part of the Borscht Belt Historical Museum down in Ellenville. But that all said, I'm going to play this first short from the Hudsey Docky series that was released in 2023. And I think this may give you some insight into what I mean when I say fantastical multimedia travelogue reimagining America's ruins. So I hope you enjoy. So I'd like to bring Isabel up for a little bit of a conversation to talk about our experiences, and then I would really like to hear questions from the audience if y'all have any. It should be noted that Isabel just won an award for the writing of that episode. Yeah. So I'd like to welcome Isabel.
Thank you. Also, those closed captions were amazing.
AI. Yes. So
Dora Jar is my new Also, we weren't in that space when we recorded those sounds. Yeah.
Oh, sure, that's great.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Sorry. That's fine. Which I think is an interesting thing about imagination and creativity in a podcast is that we found another abandoned building to go into and record as if we were recording in this farmhouse.
Mm-hmm.
But in fact, some of that conversation is made way down the line in another structure.
Yeah, I think that's the most fun of the podcast for me is I don't, well, I do now, but in the beginning I wasn't taping inside the spaces because I didn't know how to make audio, period. And so I was doing what I called sound collaging, which was going back and sourcing different materials, including posthumous recording sessions that we would do, and then stitching it all together to really give the feeling like we're there.
Yeah.
So it's been fun.
Yeah, it was very fun.
So you have been here your entire life.
Oh, I grew up here.
Grew up here, yeah.
Yes.
You have a very deep connection to this area and the land and the buildings. And I'm gonna read a statement to you, and I'd love to hear just your thoughts about it. Okay. So, abandoned spaces often leave behind a residue of what we once believed in: industry, community, leisure, and their decay feels like a mirror towards our collective reckoning. So when you explore a ruin, what does it say to you about America's history, and not just the past, but the trajectory?
Oh my gosh.
Let's go ahead.
That's a massive question.
Off easy.
But it's also a beautiful question. I think that's just a beautiful question, and something that we're constantly, well, you certainly are constantly in relationship with every time you do these explorations, which is more familiar to you than it is to me. I mean, we've gone to a couple of these together now, but you have a long archive now. I think what's interesting about that, the residue of what we once believed in, there's like this reminder that we're always creating something that we will then once have believed in. Do you know what I mean? Like, everything in the moment is exactly mirroring and reflecting our collective understanding of who we are as people. And that just continues to happen as it should. And so we keep creating what reflects our it reflects us in real time, reflects our evolution. And so there's a sense of when we're in these places that once were so relevant that the new places we're creating will also then feel this way. So I feel like it is a reminder when we're in them that we're always like evolving and devolving. We're always like becoming more relevant and then irrelevant. Like it's just this cycle that continues to go.
Yeah, actually, on that note, I'm also curious to hear your thoughts. Do you see these buildings as preludes or as benedictions?
I think that's an interesting question. I'm curious also what you mean when you say benediction in that moment, like a blessing.
Like the end of a thing, like the blessing at the end of a service.
How do you feel about it when you're in there?
Oh, a question with a question. Well, I mean, I think I've been talking about it basically the entire presentation. Once a space that was once occupied is emptied of human life, it seems to take on a whole brand new beginning, because no longer is the life that once occupied it dictating the story behind it. It is now a skeleton and the framework of something that can become a new story. And, I think one of the most curious parts about exploring abandoned buildings are specifically the graffiti tags that you come across when you explore them. Because those alone are telling the story of the people who are coming in afterwards and really trying to impress upon the walls their own mark and really sort of like a signature of legacy. And I think that is something that I have thought about extensively with this particular body of work that I've been developing is, what is legacy and why are humans so addicted to the notion of having a legacy? When the fact of the matter is we all die just as quickly as we were born. And the planet is eventually going to, I don't mean to sound doom and gloom, but the reality is that we are inching closer and closer to the sun every day. And in billions of years, we will get swallowed up by the sun. The Andromeda Galaxy is going to collide with the Milky Way Galaxy, and we will know that the idea of planet Earth will never have even been a thought.
It's an October.
I know, I love it. Smoothie, right? So I think I'm straying from your original question. It just makes me think about legacy a lot. And so in that way, there is a prelude to it because people are coming in and creating new realities and new stories in those buildings. But ultimately, everything is finite. And that's something that I really find actually a lot of comfort in, because I think death can be something that is an incredibly scary thing. And for whatever reason, these abandoned buildings have really lessened my fear of the inevitable. And there's something very relaxing in that for me.
So it's a prelude and a benediction.
It is, it's both, yeah, for sure.
Can I ask you a question?
Please, yes.
Yeah, I wasn't planning to, but what you're saying. So there's a filmmaker, a Japanese filmmaker, Rie Tajiri, who years ago had this quote that about what happens to stories that go unseen. Like, she goes through all the layers of stories that we talk about, that we know about, that have witnesses, but the last layer is about stories that there are no witnesses for, and she concludes the quote by saying, they are only told by the spirits of the dead. I have the quote on my wall. I can share with you.
Please share that with me, yeah.
It was an amazing discovery. And anyway, so what you just said makes me want to pose you both this question about the stories contained in these spaces and what your thoughts might be about who does or what does record those stories, if it's not the human eye and ear and consciousness, but it is energetic patterns that have moved through these spaces. So I'm really curious what you think about that. Like, where are those patterns captured?
Yeah, I will have to think about that all afternoon.
Yeah. That's a great question, and it's very big, and it sounds like I should get to know this filmmaker first and foremost.
But it also just does make me think about, how subjective things can be. Like whoever enters that space, and it's like history belongs to the victors kind of thing. Like whoever goes into that space and tells the story of that space shapes the understanding of it, and everyone's telling will be different. I don't yet know how to answer that question in terms of what else is recording it, if not the human who's exploring it.
I think this is where the word imagination really comes into focus, because we can only imagine the answer to that question. That is a really, I think I'd have to think about that for the rest of my life, because it's a very big question. But what I can say is that any time I'm walking into one of these spaces, I immediately feel, and it's not like, not to break the October ghosty theme here, but it's not like a spooky feeling. It's not anything that's ethereal. It's more just the knowledge that people existed here, and their stories are not documented. And so I have found that it is my responsibility in some way, shape, or form, at the very least, to invent those stories for myself. Because at some point, there's an episode of the podcast that I produced called What I Leave Behind, where I fantasize my own house being abandoned. And I fantasize the people exploring my house after it's left empty and wondering the stories that they're making up about me. And so I don't think this is at all an answer to your question, but that's what it's making me think just initially. And I would imagine that you and I, this is my colleague Dara, by the way, I would imagine we'll have extensive conversations about this until, we don't know each other anymore.
Until the sun and the earth.
That's right.
Well, speaking of imagination,
Sure. Yeah.
We were curious, and now I'll ask you, but what happens when you let yourself imagine within a ruin rather than simply document it?
So my uncle is an architect, and when I first started walking into these spaces, he was extremely concerned, not just with the notion that these are very dangerous spaces to be exploring, just architecturally speaking, and the soundness of that architecture, but more so this idea that I was getting lost inside of them, and almost the idea that my reality was becoming warped because I was spending so much time exploring these spaces, and what he considered to be ignoring what's actually happening. And I heard him out, and then I said, yeah, whatever. Because for me, it's not the notion of escapism. I actually don't think is necessarily a bad thing if a person can find, seemingly safe ways to do it. I have rules when I go into these places. Yeah. I don't go to second floors anymore because I fell through one once. I don't go to basements anymore because it's scary. And I don't go alone anymore. And especially now, the rules have really become greater because of the moment that we're living in and the danger that can come with rule bending, which I am often doing by going into these spaces. But I can't help my imagination doing what it's doing, and that imagination to me is actually the documentation, because this is if you break all the nonsense and the big fancy words and the ideas away, what this is a diary. It's a diary of my experience of living in my 30s at a cultural moment that is so incredibly disturbing and confusing and also really beautiful and filled with so much joy.
The question becomes, why are you documenting that? What is your purpose for documenting these things? See, and I think it plays back into what she was saying about nobody knows a story. So if you're going in and documenting these, and you say it's for your healing, but you're not keeping it to yourself. So what is your purpose then for doing this?
That's a great question. I can't help myself.
I know the feeling, yes.
It is in my bones to tell stories, both in private and in public. And I do think that Isabel and I went through something extraordinary together, which all of us went through with one person or another, which was a global pandemic. We are so quick now to want to forget that just happened. And if you ask me, we could have really learned a lot as a collective about what that meant. And we are now choosing, I think, collectively, to ignore it because it brought a lot of people so much pain and anguish. It was a deeply, deeply painful time. But Isabel and I had this extraordinary experience where we were going inside of these buildings that nobody wants to look at. Nobody wants to even know that they're still there. And I wanted to share that experience because I do believe, as I was saying earlier, that the human imagination is an extraordinary tool for healing and for really bringing yourself back into your own body and feeling grounded in this insane reality that we're all living in. And if I could impart the discovery that the imagination has become a tool for healing for me to even just one other person, then I think I succeeded in my quest. And so that was ultimately the goal. Can I express to other people and share in this knowledge that the human imagination is the totality of human existence, and all of the beautiful things that come underneath that.
I think that arc too was really interesting in your exploration of the things you were willing to do until you weren't, which kind of mirrored also feelings that we were having, just going through like a mental health crisis and looking for ways to be grounded again or find grounding, to kind of put yourself in dangerous places and positions, to have a relationship to what that was that we were already experiencing, and then to arrive at a place of like, okay, I'm not going on the second floor anymore. I'm not going into basements anymore. And there was a period of time when Blake was coming home and I was like, everything goes into the washing machine like immediately.
Literally, like made me get undressed outside.
Yeah, I was like, stop coming into the house covered in whatever the hell you're covered in, wherever the hell you've been. There was a whole thing going on there. Covering your shoes, there were like different phases of how to interact with that, and then arrive back at a place of like, finding safety within your own body and within the experiences that you were putting yourself. Okay, I've flung myself out too far now to somehow match my insides to the outside experience, and now I have to return to how do I take care of myself in a mad space.
Totally. Yeah.
I was just interested in the idea of immemorial, the idea of memorials, how we memorialize things, and this seems like the negative of that. Like these are things that no one wants to think about, but yet the people who immemorialize things, usually they're people with money and they curate it in a certain way. There's a lot of politics, there's a lot of stuff that goes on. I'm thinking about the Vietnam War Memorial in Washington per se. There's a woman named Lauren Markham who wrote this book in Memorial talking about these questions. It's more like a monograph, but it's a very interesting book. But when you think about who inhabited these spaces and how they left their mark, it's much more egalitarian. I mean, no one's fighting over it. Whoever comes through there, like the pioneer spirit, the investigator spirit, those people who go through there can leave their mark any way they want, and it's not being obscured by power and money and these kind of things. So it's very interesting that in a time that I assume, in a time that I felt powerless, that the way you chose to use your imagination was to go into places of people who maybe felt that way and did explore and did experiment and did use their imaginations to make a certain kind of a mark that lasts.
Do you want to write an episode for the podcast? That's amazing. And absolutely. I mean, look, I sat here 5 minutes ago and sort of, schmarmed legacy, but I'm also a mortal who is confused about why we're here, or if there's a why to the why we're here at all. And so I would be remiss if I said that, like, I don't think about that, I'm too good for that. Like, no, I wake up on Tuesday mornings and I get nervous about the fact that I have to pay my rent and, et cetera, et cetera. But can you just, like a one sentence reframing of that question really quickly? Like,
I guess it was more of a comment than a question, but, I guess there was a process question in there. I'm sorry, I'm so kind of obtuse, but.
No.
The idea of like how you use your imagination to kind of ground yourself from uncertainty, from the world. Yeah, I guess so. The world. What the process was, how you guys kind of moved into that, and what you found was so interesting. I mean, you found people who were, some of that was clearly angry, like statements about different things in the city graffiti.
Can I just add something I heard that you said?
Yeah, sure.
Because you were talking about power.
Yeah.
And the fact that
The
usually
powerlessness.
memoriam is done by money and power,
Yeah.
statues, or those kind of things,
Yeah.
versus kind of more egalitarian access.
That's
to power.
right.
I thought that was interesting.
Well, I think that on some level you were doing that kind of exploration. I just wondered how conscious it was, or how you think about that as an observation.
What was the question? How conscious of this?
Yeah, I don't, it wasn't conscious at first. I mean, I navigate the world often in disassociative states.
I don't know anybody who does not do that. I think most everyone associating most of the time.
And it only recently became clear to me that I'm not taking a lot in, when I'm walking down Wall Street. I'm not, stuff is not coming into my spirit.
You meant in Kingston.
Or just
When you said Wall Street.
Yeah, sorry, Wall Street in Kingston, or Wall Street in New York City.
But sorry.
No.
You were right, because I was thinking it was from Wall Street.
No, thank you, yeah.
Nobody's
But really,
But
both.
anyway.
It's just a lot of energy to flying at me at all times. And so when I was going into these places, a lot of it was just trying to avoid having to be present, because being present was so challenging. But then over the course of being in those spaces and starting to feel those things that you're describing, I started noticing it. And I can assure you that I am not the first person, and will certainly not be the last person who's gone through this experience and explored these things. There's an amazing writer, I don't know if y'all are familiar with Rebecca Solnit, but she wrote this beautiful book called A Field Guide to Getting Lost. And she writes about these experiences in ways that are so poetic and unique and singular to her. I actually think you introduced me to that book, Derek. So yeah, I don't know if that's an answer, but
The thing that led me to, I mean, it's a little off, but what it led me to was how much community Blake created or found himself in as a result of this project. Like, it just opened up a door to an entire world of people who were also doing this. I mean, it is actually called Urban Exploring. It had a hashtag, like we didn't know any of this stuff. And then suddenly there were all these urbexers, as they're called, exchanging places and locations and photographs and stories, and it suddenly was not, an isolated or exclusive thing, but it was actually became an inclusive community.
totally. With very curious people. And also I will say, even today, I was totally not expecting people to show up. I thought it would be Jake and you and me.
Yeah.
And me.
And Miles, yeah. Miles is visiting from Illinois.
You sent me a ticket like 2 or 3 months ago.
Yes.
Oh, I think we both have questions, but
I live with
did like learning that there was, that there were people out there exploring, has that changed how you approach the spaces? Like that there's kind of like an organized community behind you that's exchanging information?
Yeah.
Does it change it, or are you excited to know it's there? Because like before, it's like you were going in blind, like not knowing anything and just trying to find comfort in it.
Yeah.
And now you know that there's all these people who are like sharing tips and whatnot. Like,
well, just like anything in the world, toxic masculinity often ruins the party. And
that one shows up here.
It sure does. And I have discovered there are really 2 camps of people that are exploring these spaces. There are that version of people that I want nothing to do with, who feel like they have some sort of ownership over these spaces, and so they're not interested in sharing information, and it's not because they want to protect them, but they want to have some sort of like claim in them as if they own them. Then there's the other side of it, which is some of the most creative, gorgeous, talented, richly spirited people that I've ever met in my life. And at first I was trepidatious because I'm afraid of like sand, like everything is scary to me. But the more that I started meeting people, especially on Instagram specifically, and chatting with them, I've made some of my very best friends in the whole wide world, one of whom I'm actually producing a mini-series within the All-American Ruins multiverse about one specific building on the Hudson River that's going to come out next year. And so, yeah, it did change it, but also there were people who are sort of like a third party that didn't really, like they don't identify as urban explorers, because what happened during the pandemic was people needed stuff to do. And so a lot of people started sort of poking around the spaces, and I actually really liked that, because it's always fun to see curiosity seekers in the beginning phases of finding a new thing that makes them feel happy to be alive. So yeah, I think it has changed. But I've definitely softened my trepidation, and have been able to make really, really close friends who I adore and admire. So yeah.
Can I ask you another question?
Yeah.
Because we're a nod to the Ulster County Historical Society, but also to that great stat that was on the bottom of one of those slides about the number of places that you have explored, including 4 other countries. What is it about Ulster County that keeps you exploring this? Aside from living here, obviously, then what is the thread in all of the spaces in Ulster County that you've noticed? How is it similar to places elsewhere, and how is it completely unique, Ulster County?
It's similar in that you see the same story wherever you go.
Yeah.
You see an abandoned factory that at one time employed hundreds of people that no longer exists, and the surrounding community it is very clear that there's economic problems and that people are suffering. In that, though, Ulster County, I'm sure y'all are very familiar with this, but it is a microcosm of the United States. People like to think, I feel, that Ulster County is this very progressive place, and it is. But there are also a very considerable number of people in Ulster County who do not see the political spectrum the way that I see the political spectrum, and who have very different beliefs than I do. And so in that, Ulster County becomes a microcosm of the United States, and especially the moment that we're in now. The very neighborhood that you lived with it at one point, it is Trump, Biden, Trump, Biden, Biden, Trump, 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 Biden, Biden. It's very divided half and half. But I will say the thing that really sticks out about Ulster County is our proximity to the Catskill Mountains. The Catskills, I have a lifelong love affair with the Catskill Mountains. Washington Irving did a huge number on me as a child. And I don't know if y'all are familiar with the claymation, the guy who invented claymation, Will Vinton, but he produced a short film that's an adaptation of Rip Van Winkle by Washington Irving. And as a kid, at the same age that dairy farm happened, I saw this VHS tape in the library with this, sort of magical purple-esque, majestic cover, and we got it and I brought it home, and the narrator, and I forget the name of the guy who narrates it, but at the opening line of that, he says, "There's magic in the Catskill Mountains."
Oh, no.
And I was hooked. I was hooked. And it didn't occur to me until I got here and had been living here for a significant number of years that I realized, this dream of living in the Catskill Mountains came true. I don't know what it is, but there is something extraordinary about this landscape. And just as a sort of non sequitur side note, the Catskill Mountains aren't actually mountains at all. This is sort of a made-up forced term. They're actually part of the Allegheny Plateau. So geologically speaking, they're not actually mountains, which tickles me, because people are like, oh, they're so beautiful, and they're not mountains at all. But they reflect on these spaces in ways that I think more than anywhere else really exemplify the spirit of the human condition and the resilience that people have in very difficult times. Because if you think about something like the IBM plant in Kingston, which sat as a symbol of so much pain and anguish for decades, is now being revitalized as part of the Ulster BOCES program. And I just went to the opening of that space, which they revitalized, and it is stunning. And this is all to say that what we really need to be focusing on is getting billionaires to give us money so that we can revitalize spaces and offer people housing. Because there's a whole other train of thought here that we could talk about, which is the waste of resource and the housing crisis that we are just sinking deeper and deeper into. So I think that's why Ulster County specifically is so amazing to me when it comes to abandoned spaces.
If you want to take this question.
Yes.
Yeah, so I think it was while you two were producing the episode about that farmhouse that it was discovered that it is no longer there.
Yeah.
So when you enter these spaces, there's a sense of haunting of ghosts that are entering your imagination, or you're kind of experiencing the haunting of the stories that there were. What is it like for y'all who have explored numerous spaces in Ulster County and beyond that as you then pass by one day are just gone? Because for me, that's a space that I pass by that field where that house is back and forth to work, and it feels like it's haunted because that abandoned space is no longer there. And what so I guess tying back to spooky season, the haunting of those empty spaces, what would that look like if the Neville were to be torn down? And subsequently, what should be preserved historically for some of these spaces as you see it?
We didn't plant him, but
no.
Well, that farm, that one hurt. That farmhouse being gone, it was really strange. I had gone back to that place, to that specific farmhouse, while researching to write that podcast episode. And I passed the spot where I remembered it being, and got to, I think there's a gun and ammo shop on the corner. And I was like, oh, that's weird. If I'm at the gun and ammo shop, I missed the farmhouse. That's impossible. I turned around and then drove, far enough in the opposite direction where I knew I had missed it again. And so I turned back around and was just like, what is happening? I felt crazy, it's impossible. I can't find this place. I've been to several times now. And finally I figured out which driveway it is, and that there was no house there. That's why I kept missing it, because it wasn't there. And so I pulled into the driveway and I got out of the car and it was as if it had never been there. There was no foundation, there was no debris of the house. Every single piece of it, every stick was gone. And there was like a perfect yard, like just perfect grass. And I did stand there for some time and I called Blake. That might be in the recording or
That
some
might be
episode that we may have
one of the
done.
saddest voicemails I've ever gotten.
Yeah, I was kind of bereft, you know, like I had a relationship with that space, but also as I discovered in then writing the episode, it was a space that was reminding me of my childhood home, a farmhouse that I had grown up in. And so there was this kind of thread, kind of anemoia, I mean, like a nostalgia, a memory, a ghosty thing. That was really hard, that being gone. And then it was such an odd realization that you used to pass it all the time and it was part of your life. And the Neville is an interesting thing because I did grow up here and I went to prom in the Neville. Not mine, but someone else's that I was friends with in high school. And that's a whole nother strange, to be exploring a place you grew up and you're holding all of these memories already in these spaces, these memories that feel so ghosty already, like prom, fucking ghosty, Ghostville, that whole experience, you know, like what even is that anymore? As an adult, it's like, what is that tradition that we do? You know, it already feels so like a dreamscape.
Yeah, you really remember it and you just know it from the pictures.
Yeah, it's so odd. And then to have, you know, talk to Blake about exploring the Neville and then that being taken down. There was some feeling about that one, like, ooh, you know, like the kind of building blocks that make up your life are starting to be disassembled a little bit, and that's a very odd feeling. And also, yeah, things change. You know, like there's that constant reminder, which I think we spoke to a little bit in the beginning of this, of like, this is the cycle of life experience and society. Were you gonna ask a question?
Yes.
There's so many people at once, so that's what.
I love this, I really do.
Oh, thank you.
I find it interesting that the two spaces that you focus on are kind of residential, but one's a temporary residence, the other is somebody's home. But you open with a barn, which is not a residence at all, except for maybe animals, right? And that also makes me, I was wondering about, well, first, all American. Why all American? Because here we are in an area which has the highest concentration of Dutch housing in North America, and over there, or somewhere like that, is Sopus, where there were Native American communities, and then that makes me think of a sense of abandonment. You know, you go home from school, right? I think of school because the school I went to is now empty; it's abandoned. But you know, there's a house up near the Rhinecliff Bridge, which was abandoned for decades and sort of stripped of all the stuff. It was a Dutch house. I can't remember what the heck its name is. Now it's like a B&B or something like that.
Is it Birdcliff?
No, this is right before you get to the Rhinecliff Bridge.
Okay.
It's hidden, you can't really see it, but it's right there. And it was abandoned and people took all these component parts like doors and stuff, and now it's been restored. So now it looks like the house it might have been, but it's not. So I'm just tossing all that out there because I found this so interesting.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, me too. And I will just say that the All-American specifically, that was born out of a little wink to my father. My father and I have a very interesting relationship. He leaned far more right in the political side of things than I ever can imagine myself leaning. And it brought a lot of tension between the two of us, and it caused sort of a fissure in our relationship. But when I was building this particular body of work, I couldn't help but think about my dad having told himself this story over and over and over again as to what America is. and what the word American specifically means. And he had a very narrow-minded idea of what that was. And that is because my father was born and raised in Buffalo, New York. And he watched the evisceration of his entire upbringing happen before his very eyes. And it created a well of resentment and deep sadness for him that he never got over and has continued to fall further and further into. He's isolated himself completely in the mountains of Oregon. He doesn't talk to anybody. He has Fox News running on 24/7 in this little trailer. This is a man with a PhD. And so I wanted to figure out how to really stay connected with my dad, because he's still my dad. And he loves me, and he's been an incredible father. And so All-American specifically, this, I actually don't think I ever talked about this, that was a wink to my father. Because I felt like it was my responsibility to find some kind of grounding space between us where we could still feel that father-son relationship that has slipped very, very far away. So that is where that came from. But also just the word American, like what the hell is that word anymore? It's a very, very strange word. So yeah. Yes?
Well, I was just thinking a lot, I guess it's maybe a comment, maybe a question, about the relationship between you and the people that were in these places. You know, you haven't talked much about that, and I'm curious about it. What kind of sparked it for me is my parents honeymooned at the Netherlands. And I can picture this, we have a family picture of them like going down, on a sled, big happy face. And, I kept thinking so where are they in all of this?
Thank you for that question. And I'd love to see that photograph. That's amazing. But at first, it really wasn't even about the abandoned spaces at all. They were just a place to exist in that I found to be quite beautiful in their decay, where I could reflect on my own life. And again, as I said, this is just a diary when you sweep it all away. 3 seasons of the podcast, it got very boring reflecting on my own life, which is why I started inviting in other voices, because I could only hear myself talk for so long, as much as the mic hurt. And so I did start to wonder about that. And people asked me, but at the time when I was first building this project, it wasn't about that. Of course they came to mind, but they were more elusive imagination, specters that I was thinking about. And so now, as we sort of tumble into the 4th season of the podcast, which we just started production on, I have started to explore this very thing. And I haven't told anybody this, but that mini-series that I am producing, which will be the 5th season of the podcast, is all about this one school that was a giant mansion that Hamilton Fish and his wife built during the Gilded Age, that was then transformed into a Catholic school that is now abandoned, sitting on the Hudson River. And my producing partner Steph and I, we found the nuns that used to be there. We found students that used to attend the school. We found relatives of Hamilton Fish who still live and have connections to this building. And so, this is all to say that the reason I wanted to come to this particular space today, the Ulster County Historical Society, is because I was also afraid of trying to be a historian. I'm not an academic in any sense of the imagination, and so I was afraid to try to be that. I got over that fear, and so I am starting to seek grant funding, and the reason I wanted to come here today specifically is because I want to start engaging with that piece of it a little bit more. I think people are curious about it, far more than they're curious about my little, finite life. So,
what occurs to me, also is that, those are the stories, the untold stories.
Totally.
Somebody had, mentioned that before, and, those, the undocumented stories.
Absolutely. And, quite frankly, there's a lot more grant money to be found
For us.
if we position it that way than a personal journal. So I'd love to talk to your parents.
I would too.
Oh,
Doesn't the history of this stuff, doesn't that just call to you though? That's when I go into these old places and buildings, I want to know, I want to know about what happened, who lived here, what were they doing, why was this here? That just is like for me, I can't go into a place, and later I'll show you my old building. Without having to know everything about it. It's like for me, that's their story.
Totally. I think again, I was just afraid of trying to become a historian in some respect. People who are in research and get their PhDs in history, etc. Like, it's not just a quick Google search for them. The word research is a highly misunderstood word, and so I think there was a lot of trepidation and fear there, but that's kind of died away.
Somebody's got to do it.
Yeah, totally.
I'm involved with historic Red Hook across Dutchess County, and I was a high school English teacher, and that your statement, if you go to your local historic societies, there are people there who can help you on an amateur level, but do that kind of research. But someone asked the question about, what are the memorials to regular people? And they're like, what we create ourselves, like for our families, and then we pass that down. In many places, the buildings have, I'm thinking about, a lot of churches have memorials inside in them. And those definitely are from the people who are wealthy and who could afford to do that. But there are also a lot of stories, like you're talking about with your parents, and that photograph and that sort of thing. And there are people who are very interested in that, and reaching out to a local historic society. There are volunteers there who can help you, and we nerd out totally about that. I'll do a little commercial. We have something that we have at Historic Red Hook called the Cemetery Crawl, and my friend and I both like to walk around in cemeteries. And so we're like, hey, we could do some research. And so we have researched, there's some famous people, but also regular people. And we try to do people who've been gone for about 100 years, because we don't want to upset anyone about their family or, in big privacy. But we have about 150 stories now that we've done over 5 years of people that their stories hadn't been told other than within their families. And so they can be accessed on our website. You don't have to go to the cemeteries, but they're all videotaped. I mean, there's photographs, and then there's someone reading the stories, and then we document our sources. So that's what we've been doing, but it's historians, but amateur historians.
Oh, I love that. I will also say really quickly, my 9 to 5, as we mentioned at the beginning, I work for an organization called TMI Project. And from Monday to Friday, I'm constantly enveloping myself in the very, very intricate, deep parts of other people's stories, which is very exhausting. And so I think that's also part of it, that I just get to Friday at 3 p.m., and I'm spent because I'm constantly investing myself in other people's stories. But I've gotten used to it now, so I would love to,
Well, what you just said made me think of the ways in which many of us feel unheard or unseen. What is this? All these spaces were occupied by people who are no longer seen or heard. And then everybody here could tell stories of one kind or another. I could, or we remember stories told to us, but most of us will never be heard or seen. And the stories of the people who told us stories, those stories are also lost. So those are the ghosts. I think you started by talking about, I can't remember now, but something about this sense of presence, and but it's massive mystery.
Somebody once said that, and I can't quote who said it, but it was good. Something about that when a person's name is said, that means they are not forgotten. So the more, when you look into history...
That's out of the Egyptian Book of the Dead.
Thank you. That's what I know the Egyptian Book.
To speak the names of the dead is to make them live again.
To make them live again. And so when we go and do these things in the cemeteries, I love a good cemetery. And you even just say their names, you have brought them and their story back to life. And so I think that's kind of what you're doing, even though you don't know it. It's happening because when you put these things on and you talk about these people's houses, and then she comes up and says, my parents were born, and well, we've just said their names. Technically. Not technically, but so there they are, they're alive again. And so as long as you can keep those names, and kind of that's as we get closer to the grave, where some ways to keep our families, to keep our names alive. So with like my grandkids and everything, I do all these things, and I do our history and everything to pass down to my kids and my grandkids, so they'll say, oh, my grandma Kathy did that. Well, now I'm alive. Does that make sense?
Totally.
Yeah. That's kind of the nutshell for me.
I love it.
Thank you for that.
Was there a hand back here?
There was a hand back there, I thought, but...
Sure, I'll put a hand up.
Oh, great.
Where are you going next? How are you finding the next ruin? There's a community of the Xers, is that what's the term?
Urbexers.
Sorry, Xer means something else. So are people showing you this is a place you should go, or you're finding them, like what's your bucket list of abandoned ruins to find, and have you considered revisiting to see what, obviously you had the farmhouse at Isabel, you got to see it 10 years from the bedroom in time. Are you revisiting any of them to see where are they? Because obviously no one wanted to renovate or reuse or repurpose. We get to see that where we live. Someone chose that old barber shop on Broadway that turned it into a screening room, right?
Yes.
It could have just disappeared, that space, but where's next, and are you revisiting?
I'll work backwards. I'm constantly revisiting. There is a house maybe 5 minutes up north on 209. It's at the corner of 209 and Route 28 going up to Woodstock. And somebody transformed this house that sits on the property where the Sunset Drive-In used to be in the 50s and the 60s. They've transformed this 4-story house into a monument to Greta Thunberg. And when I first discovered it, I walked around the back, and this artist, this unbelievable graffiti artist, there are the giant phrase on the house, and it said, "Panic like the house is on fire." And then they have taken these huge pieces of wood and created these flames coming out of the windows. And I was so stunned, and I was like, what 80s rock lyric is this? And in fact, it's a quote from Greta Thunberg when she was speaking at the World Economic Forum, probably a decade ago at this point, where she was pleading with the nations to please do something because climate change is very real. And so I actually often visit that very house. It was in the slide deck. But I can tell you, the place I really want to go is in Turkey. It is called Burj Al Babis, and it is an abandoned retirement community that got this close to being finished, and then the 2018 economic crisis happened in Turkey, and 375 of these, they look like little Disney castles.
Oh, I've seen that. Yeah.
Were left completely abandoned. I would love to go there, and if we're really dreaming big, Chernobyl. But that's a pipe dream, and I don't think my family would be very appreciative of that.
Can you do one on the Hudson Valley Mall?
Well, so actually, the Hudson Valley Mall, I don't know if y'all know the actor Mandy Patinkin, but he just brought attention to that again.
So one thing I missed what you said.
The Hudson Valley Mall.
Oh, yeah.
he brought attention to the Hudson Valley Mall and its emptiness, and I've been very curious about.
Well, it plays into what you were talking about, adaptive reuse, housing needs, critical needs. Got a huge space there. It's actually beautiful.
It is.
You know, like when you
Beautiful. Yes,
so
it's like the best food.
But it's privately owned. There's nothing that can be done until that private owner decides to come to the table.
Yeah.
Also to your question, I am going back to the town that that farmhouse was in, that no longer is there. And I had gone back to it to research it for this episode, which is when I found it not there. And came across some other space in Walkill that was part of my childhood that I had thought was a dream or some just weird thing from childhood, made up thing. And I came across it when I was there, and like a whole flood of memory came back, and I went home and asked my dad about it, and he was like, oh yeah, that was Jimmy's mill. And we used to spend time there when I was a kid. My father was friends with the man who ran this mill, brick mold mill in Walkill. That was like 6 generations of one family running this mill with the old like wooden wheel on the outside and the water creating the energy for it. And it's now abandoned. And so I got to explore it as a result of going back to research this other place. And to answer some other questions that were asked, we'll be writing very specifically about the people who were part of that property and that now abandoned space.
Yeah.
Definitely flinging myself down a research hole, telling a story of real people.
Yeah, Isabel is making a massive triumphant return to season 4. She'll be producing a 2-part episode about this particular
A very special episode.
Very special episode. Yes. Another award-winning episode.
Blake, why don't we take one more question?
Yes, please. Absolutely. Just one more. If we.
Anyone
if
didn't
we
get
want.
to ask the question who wants to ask the question? Okay.
I think good.
Can I?
Yes.
So I'm not from here. I work in local government elsewhere, and I'm often like leading the team that tears places like that down, right? And we do it because we're thinking about the future, and we're obligated as public servants working in a community development department to think about that. And every time we do a major demolition project, we keep one brick. And we keep it because we don't quite know how to honor the memory of something, because we have to destroy that thing in order to create future memories for some future time with some new thing that's going to go there. And it's often very challenging to talk through kind of those projects, and there's lots of people with emotions wrapped up into something like, that hotel and resort. I have other buildings I can think of that I'm sure there are mixed feelings in a community for. It's both a place of fond memories that you don't want to see go, and yet it's also an area of blight and an opportunity for refreshing the community if you can redevelop it, right? When you're in these places and you think about the fact that many of them will be torn down, or nature will tear them down in time, because that is the fate of all buildings eventually if abandoned. How do you think about the future? The focus of a lot of your work, especially in its early days, is about the past, either the reality of the past or your imaginings of a past. But how does the future play into this? Do you ever find yourself walking a site or walking through a building and thinking about the future in any particular way?
Oh yes, all the time. And I think there's a misconception that my work is strictly living in the past. The reality of it is I am imagining a past in the present, hoping for a better future. And so it's not just the building itself that I'm dreaming of when it comes to the future of that space, but it is the reality of what we're living through right now. And that's why I often say these buildings are representative of this moment and this hope that I have for what this country actually is and what it could be if we shifted things a little bit. And so if we're going to go just strictly to the future of like the architecture of the place, absolutely. And there are so many places that are doing that the right way. In my hometown, Colorado Springs, there's a beautiful city park called Millennium Park. And that area was a giant power plant that was left abandoned for a really long time. And it was so hideous, and like it blocked the view of the mountains, and it was a problem. And so when that building came down and they built this gorgeous park, I was elated because it meant the land itself could actually be used for the betterment of the community where that building once stood. And you know, when I went home in October of 2023 to Colorado to work on this project with History Colorado, which is the state history organization there, I found myself feeling very resentful of the dramatic changes that I saw in the state of Colorado, as if I had some sort of ownership over the state. The reality is, we don't own these places. And even when we do own the place, we're gonna die, and then somebody else is gonna own it, or it's gonna get swallowed up by the earth. And so it would be very silly for me to sit here and you know, hope that we could just hold on to all of these things when the waste of resource is tremendous, and the waste of land in general is also tremendous. And you know, if I could see the Neverly Grand Hotel revitalized and turned into affordable housing units, and there are billionaires in this very county who could make that happen at the drop of a hat tomorrow, I would be thrilled, because that is the change that I'm hoping to see, that people can have a place to live, or a community can have a place to go and feel comfortable. So I don't know if...
Yeah, no, that's the answer.
Yeah. I will.
So that was the end of our time.
I just want to say a huge thank you to both of you.
If you're just tuning in, welcome to the third season of Abandoned, the All-American Ruins podcast. Join me as I take you on an immersive sonic journey, recounting my expeditions of abandoned spaces across the United States, which I transform into fantastical audio experiences that allow you, dear listener, to dive into my imagination with me, or maybe inspire you to go out and use your own. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, and don't forget to rate and review the show. Also, if you like to read or enjoy amateur photography, just know that each episode this season is adapted from the original All-American Ruins blog, where you can catch up on more of my adventures. Just visit allamericanruins.com or follow me on Instagram at allamericanruins. Thank you, my friend, for taking the time to explore these abandoned spaces with me.